Hi friends, welcome back to the Daily Bible Project podcast, and we're in episode 205, I think, of our journey together, Lord willing, through the whole Bible, chapter by chapter, verse by verse. And of course, we did an introduction season, and now we're in season 2, which is this wonderful journey through the book of Genesis. And we're in part 136, and we're dealing with the first half of Genesis chapter 18, when these three strangers appear to Abraham at his tent. And I've called this passage Very Strange Strangers. So we discovered last time that these three strangers appear to Abraham while he's sitting at the entrance to his tent. So let's just remind ourselves of the opening text, which said this in Genesis chapters 18 verses 1 and 2. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre. While he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day, Abraham looked up and saw three men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bow low to the ground. So Abraham looks up and he sees these three men approaching and then standing nearby. And when he sees them, he bows down before them. Now, the strangers in the story really are strangers in the sense that initially they're clearly unidentified. And I think the ambiguity of who they are or at least who they are initially, is important, because when we all encounter someone new, they are, in a sense, initially, of course, a stranger to us. But it's important to remember that even a stranger has intrinsic natural rights and worth. And that's predicated on the biblical concept that everyone, we are all created in the image of God. Everyone, every human being has contained within them something of the Logos, the divine nature of God within them. Therefore, that also tells us all human beings must be respected. Not only in relation to how we view ourselves, but in relation to how we view all other people, and even more so, I would say, to strangers, and even more so to the marginalized in society. You know what, friends? Even the most hardened criminals have a touch of the divine in them. The divine spark is in them, and everybody must be treated with respect, and everybody must be considered as having the potential to be transformed by God. Without that, you become in great danger of developing an ever-increasing cynical view of the world. Never let go of that. Never forget that fact that everyone is worthy of the love of God. And the idea being offered here is that everyone, strangers or otherwise, should be extended some form of hospitality. So anyway, Abraham knows what to do when these strangers appear, and he bows down before them and he immediately offers them hospitality. He is determined to take a hospitable attitude towards them and welcome them. I think when you show trust, particularly to a stranger, you by nature offer an opportunity to draw the best out of that other person. Doing so, in a sense, is a minor act of courage. It's like making a gesture that encourages the divine image that is in the other person to step forward. Even in the most challenging of person-to-person encounters and communication, the decision to reach out warmly as best you can means that conversation have the potential to be nurtured, and God willing, maybe even restore someone. When you listen to people, when you listen to the stories of strangers, you learn something you didn't know before you met them. And that means you can go out into this world and you can treat that world of strangers as an endless vista of places where you can learn about things you didn't know, and get to know people and get to find the divine image within those people. But did you notice that the opening verse of this passage, it says the Lord appeared to Abraham? Now, it's a very important point to make, because the word translated Lord, the phrase used is actually the personal name of God. It actually says in the original text, Yahweh appeared. Now we note Abraham was pitched under the oak tree at Mamre in the middle of the day. So it's the middle of the day, so obviously it's hot. And it then tells us, and if you look at the King James, it says Abraham looked up, or he raised his eyes. Now many commentators suggested that this means he had been meditating or praying, but at any rate he raises up his eyes as the men approach him. And when he sees them, he rushes to the tent door to meet them, and he bows down before them, low to the ground. Now there are some nuances and shades of things being offered here. Doesn't this feel, in a sense, like a position of worship? It's helpful to understand exactly what is happening. He's standing at the door, or praying at the door of the tent when they approach, and initially these three strangers, they just stand there. Now this was the normal custom. It's like someone coming to your door and knocking the door. They don't just go straight in. They wouldn't just come in and begin a conversation with you. They would wait until you stepped out and offered an invitation to enter. When God shows up at your door, friends, and he might do, it seems he's likely, the picture here suggests that he's likely to wait for you to let him in. So don't miss the opportunity if God appears at your door to invite him in. But in this situation, Abraham looks up, sees them, and he invites them to stay, to tarry a while. Now, before we continue in the text, I want to pause for a moment and talk some more about these three men and who they were. In verse 2, as I said, it just says three men. But verse 1 had already declared that the Lord appeared to him. Now, general agreement across most Bible commentators is that one of these three men is in fact the Lord, the pre-incarnate Jesus himself. As a matter of fact, if you listen carefully when we get further into this passage, you'll notice in verse 13, it also says, "And the Lord said to Abraham." So one of these three strangers who appear is definitely the Lord. Verse 1 here implies it, but verse 13 later, which we'll get to later, will confirm it. The other two men are angels, and that will also be confirmed later in the story, both later in this chapter and in fact in the one that follows. Anyway, I think it's really significant that one of them is in fact Christ the Lord, taking on the manifestation of human form of a person. This event, a Christophany as it's sometimes called, happens occasionally, but it happens several times in the Old Testament. So here we are. There are three men, including the Lord, and one of them speaks, and Abraham sees them and bows down before him. And then we will see that a conversation between them begins. But we'll take a look at what that conversation is and what it said and what it means in the next episode. So I look forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow. Bye for now.